I was thinking about something the other day, about why so many men, good men, capable men, who worked hard their whole life, end up in their 50s or 60s feeling like they're only just starting to figure things out, only just starting to understand what actually matters. And I kept asking myself the same question: why does it take so long? Because it's not like the information isn't available. It's not like no one ever said anything. People talk about regret, about presence, about not missing what matters. We've all heard the version of that speech. But there is a difference between hearing something and actually letting it land, actually letting it change the way you move through your days. And what I've come to believe is that most men can't really hear certain things until they've lived enough to understand the cost, until they've personally felt the weight of years spent chasing the wrong thing, or spent in the wrong gear, or given to the wrong priorities. Not bad priorities, just misaligned ones. And by the time that understanding arrives, fully, not just intellectually, lots of time has already passed. I think about men I know. Men who are brilliant, responsible, genuinely good people. And so many of them hit a certain age, somewhere in the 40s, sometimes the 50s. And something shifts. They start talking differently, quieter, more honest, less interested in convincing you of something and more interested in actually figuring it out, less invested in what they look like and more invested in how they actually feel. And you can hear in the way they talk that something has woken up, something that was always there, but had been running in the background for decades without ever making it to the foreground. And the thing that gets me, the thing I find both heartbreaking and beautiful, is the way so many of them say the same thing. I wish I'd understood this sooner. But here is the strange part. The understanding they're describing, the thing they wish they'd had sooner, it wasn't hidden. It wasn't secret knowledge. Most of them have felt it at some level for years. A quiet unease, a persistent low-grade question, the sense that something important was being left unattended. They felt it. They just didn't stop long enough to listen to it. And this is where things actually become interesting. Because the question isn't really why men wake up late. The question is what keeps a man asleep? What are the specific things, the legitimate, understandable things that make it so hard to spend decade after decade moving through your own life without ever fully inhabiting it? Because when you understand that, when you really understand what keeps a man asleep, you start to see a pattern. And the pattern is not what most people expect. I think there are a few things. The first one is the most obvious and the most forgiving. Men are busy, genuinely, legitimately busy. Careers, families, financial obligations, the sheer weight of adult responsibility. And that busyness isn't a failure. It's evidence of the man doing what was asked of him. But busyness has a shadow side that most men never talk about. It's the perfect excuse not to look inward. When every day is full, when there's always something more urgent, the internal questions never get priority. They get deferred again and again. I'll think about it later, when things slow down, when the kids are older, when I have more time. And the later never quite arrives. Because life doesn't slow down. It just changes shape. And the question just keeps getting deferred until at some point those questions stop being deferrable. They just show up, uninvited, insistent, usually in the quiet spaces, early morning, late at night, a long drive alone. Most men never notice the deferral happening in real time. They only notice the accumulation. But there's a second thing that keeps men asleep. And this one is harder to see. It's identity. Specifically, the way a man's sense of self gets fused with his function, what he does, what he produces, what he provides. And when your identity lives entirely in your function, when you are what you do, then stopping to ask deeper questions feels genuinely dangerous. Because if the answers turn out to be uncomfortable, if you look at yourself honestly and something doesn't add up, then the whole structure is at risk. And most men, understandably, would rather not risk that. And so they don't look. And something changes after 40 that starts to make that avoidance harder to maintain. The function starts to shift. The career peaks or plateaus. Also, the children grow up and need you differently. The body starts to speak a new language, and all the external structures that held the identity in place start to loosen. And in that loosening, the questions come back. Older now, more insistent. Who am I when the role is finished? What do I actually stand for? What was any of these for? Here's what I've come to understand. Waking up late isn't really about missed information. It's about timing. There are certain things a man can only understand after he's lived enough to feel their weight. You can tell a 30-year-old that his career isn't identity, that the time he spends chasing external success is a time that's not going somewhere else. He'll nod. He might even believe you, but he won't feel it. Not the way a man feels it at 48, when he's sitting at a dinner table, realizing he barely knows the people he loves most. Not the way a man feels at 52, when the job he sacrificed a decade for disappears in a restructure, and he doesn't know who he is without it. Experience is the teacher that preparation can't replace. And the cost of that, the real cost, is that the understanding arrives after some of the choices that would have benefited from it are already made. That's not a failure. That's a human condition. But it does mean something. It means the men who wake up, whenever they wake up, have a responsibility to themselves to not defer again, to not wait for the next version of later, to do something real, something honest, with the clarity they finally have. So let me ask you something. Is there something you already know? Not something you need to figure out. Something you already understand at some level that you've been carefully not acting on. A relationship that needs more of you than it's not getting. A way of living that doesn't quite fit anymore. Something you care about that keeps getting pushed to the back. Because most men who feel the thing I'm describing, that late arriving clarity, aren't actually surprised by it. They knew on some level, in some quiet part of themselves. They always knew. They just kept moving, kept busy, kept the questions in the waiting room. And what I want to offer, not as advice, just as a thought, is that the waiting room is always going to be full. There will always be something more pressing, something more urgent, something that justifies one more deferral. The question is whether you're willing to let the important thing stay in the waiting room indefinitely, or whether now, not at some later version of now, but actually now is when it gets your attention. Men don't wake up late because they're careless. They wake up late because they were doing the thing that was asked of them. Building, providing, showing up. And those things are real. They matter. It's not dismissing them. But somewhere in the doing of all that, somewhere in the years of functioning and producing and managing, a quiet project got neglected. The project of actually knowing yourself, of living in alignment with something genuine, of being present, not just physically, but actually there. And the waking up, whenever it comes, is the moment a man decides to start that project, not instead of the other things, alongside with whatever time he has, in whatever condition he finds himself. The men who do that, who actually start, they don't spend their remaining years in regret. They spend them in something rarer, a kind of quiet, unglamorous, deeply personal wholeness. Not perfect, not resolved, just real. I don't think waking up late is a tragedy. I think it's what happens when a man finally runs out of ways to postpone himself. And there's something almost merciful about that. The life that kept you busy, the obligations, the roles, the relentless forward motion. It was also the life that built you, that gave you the experience to actually understand what you're now being asked to understand. So maybe the timing isn't as wrong as it feels. Maybe you needed all of it. The years, the work, the blur of it, to get to the place where this finally makes sense.